It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
By men of many nations and backgrounds.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have a liftoff.
Doom Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Two Doom Men podcast. It is Skaggs here, and I'm joined, of course, always by the captain.
What's up, everybody?
And we got another special episode for you today. We have Stephen Dincher from the Libertarian Party, Mises Caucus. Stephen, what's going on, bro?
Hey, not too much.
Hey,
Did I pronounce your name right?
Yes, yeah, you did. You can call me Steve, though.
Okay.
Stephen's my mom's name for me.
So how you doing, man?
Doing all right. Life is busy. My wife's pregnant, so we've been dealing with that over the last 14 weeks, which is awesome, but also, been sick and had
Congratulations.
to take care of
Congrats,
thanks.
man.
We've been trying for a while, so.
Yeah, I'm going through the same thing right now, actually. My wife's pregnant also, first one, so congrats,
man. Second, but it's been a while. Like
okay.
We have a 6-year-old already, but we've been trying for a while, so it's very exciting. But it comes with challenges. So, yeah, glad I could be here because I never know when I got a moment.
Yeah, I hear you definitely on that. So let's get into it, man. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role with the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus?
Sure. So I came from a neocon conservative Rush Limbaugh baby kind of background. But I always had a little bit of libertarian streak. I remember being in high school and college and be like, I don't care if gay people get married. I mean, they can just call it something different. I don't care. Like, why does the government care about that? I don't think it should be banned. And same with
always
drugs.
wondered that.
Yeah. So, like, I'm from strict conservative Christian world, but I'm always like,
doesn't concern me. Yeah.
Right. And why is the government like? I kind of always had. I was homeschooled as well, so I didn't get like the indoctrination from the public schools about history. So like I learned the Constitution and the American Revolution and all that. Now it's definitely more of a nationalist bent, but like I was like, there's nowhere in the Constitution that it says we should be involved, like the government should be involved in marriage. So why the heck is it? Like so I kind of had that very strict constructionist constitutional look. Libertarianish, like it's not my business if this guy wants to do crack. I mean, he shouldn't show up at my house doing it, but like so there's always this libertarian streak in my conservatism. The part I didn't go all the way into until later after grad school was the wars and the police. Like that was like the last thing I held on to. Hoorah, rah, America's awesome. There wasn't a war that was fought that wasn't justified, all that kind of stuff. The whole indoctrination on that side of things. So when it came around to the 2012 election, most people will say, oh, the 2012 election did it. It was Ron Paul. Actually, it wasn't that for me. It was randomly, I found a YouTube video of Milton Friedman talking about greed and capitalism on the Phil Donahue show in the 70s. It was like a short 2.5-minute clip about greed. And I was like, holy cow, this is an amazing little clip. This should be taught in schools everywhere. I posted it on Facebook. And a buddy of mine was like, Friedman was good, but Rothbard was better. Of course, I'm like, well, hell, who's Rothbard then? I don't even know. I've never heard of this guy. So, of course, I
down the rabbit hole you went.
Down the rabbit hole I went. I mean, it took about 6 months for me to go from Ron Paul is pretty good, but I don't really like his isolationist foreign policy to, holy hell, I'm an anarchist. Like, the state is the worst possible thing, and everything I learned about history was totally wrong. And I read economics. I read Economics for Real People by Gene Callahan because I was like, I don't know anything about economics. That's not a good thing. And then I tried to dive into Man, Economy, and State by Rothbard. That is a beast. I got about 3/4 of the way through. I got to finish that sometime.
Okay.
But really, it was his economic history lectures that red pilled me hardcore. Like learning about the Civil War, the economics of the Civil War, and then like the Republicans who dominated the era at the time were the big government people, and like boondoggles with all of the massive spending. They started the income tax and all the rest. And I'm like, how come I never knew? I've been a Republican all my life, and I never knew that the parties were totally reversed back in the late 1800s and stuff. Totally red pilled me about like, well, what the heck do I not know about anything else? So starting around 2013, I was like going full bore into the libertarian stuff, and I was probably a jerk about it too, as I've found most libertarians are when they first discover things. Man, they can get jerky about the non-aggression principle, and you're a statist, like.
Oh, I've come to learn that on social media, especially, and I think that's that's more of a social media thing too. But yeah, some libertarians could be jerks for no reason about everything, or they could be social justice warriors, virtue signalers, just as hard as any woke person can. My views are more pure than your views.
Yeah.
So shut up.
You're not a real libertarian.
Right.
We've learned that could be in any scenario, in any group of people. It doesn't even have to be politics.
That might be like a intrinsic human trait to want to virtue signal to people.
It is for sure. And I definitely went through a prolonged phase as I was digging deeper and more. Like I would say, stupid stuff about the military. There was no nuance really. It was like, oh, I'm going full bore, and there's no room for nuance. And so since then, I've certainly softened. I don't think every individual human being who happens to serve in the military is awful kind of thing. Like I'm not clumping them all together, which was a natural thing for me to think when I first realized, holy cow, these wars are the most horrible, evil things, and these people are going and doing it all. But kind of definitely softened up on that. How I got involved with the Mises Caucus, I was a libertarian from like early 2013 after the 2012 election, but the Mises Caucus didn't start until the middle of 2017. Those 4 years in between, I was just a libertarian. I didn't have much to do with the party at all. I was living in Connecticut. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, but I moved to Connecticut in 2012. And there wasn't much of a party here to speak of anyway. So I really didn't know anything about it. I just was a libertarian. I registered as libertarian to vote, but I didn't get involved with anything libertarian party. Until 2017, I saw that there was a libertarian, I was on the Mises.org website all the time now. So then I saw there was a Mises Caucus of the Libertarian Party in 2017. It was formed probably in June. By August, I was in the Facebook group. So it was pretty early. And I just kind of poked around. I commented, but looked at what they were doing.
I think that group is banned now, right? That Facebook group?
They got added back in.
What did they get banned for? How does a libertarian get banned from Facebook now? Because I know how to do it real quick.
Anything. And it was probably some meme somebody posted in the group, 3 months ago. I actually don't know which one what caused it. I just know it got zucked, and then about 48 hours later, it was back. It's going to get zucked again. There's no doubt about it. So it is what it is. So I was in that Facebook group pretty early on, and I was just kind of sitting back and watching, observing what was going on. And they had plans for the 2018 convention in New Orleans, where they were going to try to get one of their guys as chair because they didn't like the chair at the time. I didn't know anything at all what was going on. Made no sense to me. But I liked the Mises Caucus, or I liked the Mises Institute, so I was like, well, these guys are probably my kind of people anyway. So I was watching a little bit, and come 2018, when they went down to the convention, they obviously failed at what they had set out to do, but they'd only been around for a year. And 2 days later, or something like that, it was Tom Woods said, "Oh, I'm going to join. I'm going to join the Libertarian Party. I'm in in it for the Mises Caucus. And I was like, well, if Tom Woods is doing it, I might as well too. So that's when I joined the party, was like July 7th or something, 2018. Just a couple of days later, I was tagged in the Facebook group because they were looking for state organizers in all the different states to try to organize a caucus in each state, because just in order to go to the national convention, you have to be elected in your state party. So if you're not involved in the state party and the Mises Caucus doesn't have a presence in your state party, then you're not going to get elected to go to the national convention anyway, and then you're not going to be able to do anything at the national convention that you want to. So they were really looking for organizers. Someone who was from Connecticut in the Facebook group voluntold me to do it, and there was really nobody else. So I was like, okay, I don't really know what this means, but I'll do it. And that really kicked
Risk
things
of fate.
off. Yeah, I tell you, that really kicked things off. By November of 2018, we had formed a Discord group, and it was just two of us. It was a guy.
Yeah, there's a lot in there now. I'm in there. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot in there now. That was not necessarily me or even any of the rest of us in Connecticut. It was just the national caucus just gaining more steam and people listening to other podcasts, and you're like, well, I want to get involved. So from November 18, we had our first meeting on the Discord voice, and two of us showed up. There was a few others that had expressed interest, but two of us showed up to the meeting. We're like, well, that's a start, I guess. By March of 2019, I had started the local county. It wasn't a county at the time, but a local regional party for the Libertarian Party, because that was really the only thing that you could do. There wasn't anything. It was the state party and nothing else. And if you wanted to get involved in the state party, what are you supposed to do? There's no meeting. So I said, well, I'll send out letters to registered libertarians in the area, and we'll see what happens. And hey, I got 12 people show up at the first meeting. About 5 of them consistently showed up afterwards. And that doesn't seem like a whole lot, but when you're in Connecticut and there was nothing before you, hey, that's not too bad. We still get about 7 or 8 show up now. We've moved to be the New Haven County group. Okay. And by the end of 2019, one of our members had started the Windham County group. He actually started the Windham County group before I started mine. And we had gotten a couple of other Mises Caucus members who had just come along and start the beginnings of the Hartford County one. But what was interesting is that by the 2020 convention for the state, I was already involved with the state board, the ruling body of the party in the state, simply because I had shown up and started to do something. So they were like, hey, you started that Naugatuck Valley group. Why don't you be on the SCC, the State Central Committee? Okay, I'll do it. So there were already a couple of us on the State Central Committee simply because we had shown up and started doing stuff, and they invited us onto it. I noticed, I took a look at our bylaws. I said, okay, let's change some things. So they had me on the bylaws committee. I said, hey, everybody come to the convention. Everybody we know, all the Mises Caucus people, come to the convention. All the people who aren't Mises Caucus but are involved with our local county affiliates, come to the convention, because I want to make this bylaws change that will hopefully invigorate more county groups. And so they did. Well, what happened with that was that we ended up, the Mises Caucus people stood up to be elected for the State Central Committee and got elected because we were the people knew. It was really remarkable. We had not tried to take over, quote unquote, the party or anything. Just we started to be active, and so all of a sudden we have a huge influence on the state party, and that's been like that since February 2020, and it's only grown.
Yeah. Hey, Doom Nation, it's Gags here, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Two Doom Men. If you like what we are about, help us spread the message by subscribing to our channels and sharing the show with your friends. That's the best way we can get around big tech's algorithms. You can also help support the work we do by subscribing to our Patreon account at patreon.com/2doommen or by going to linktree.com/2doommen. That will bring you to everywhere our show has a presence. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy the show.
That's awesome.
This is what I love about the Mises Caucus is people keep asking me and Chris, what can we do? What can we do? What can we honestly really do to stop all this crazy shit that's happening in the world from happening? And I don't have the most perfect answer, but you guys are actually trying to do something. You're trying to build a political movement, a party, running for, local offices, putting together a state party. That's one option of trying to do something. So I really appreciate the fact that you guys are organizing, making a plan, trying to, push the libertarian message out there, actually in concrete steps, as opposed to, even us just coming on here and bitching about the problems of the world every week.
Sure. And of course, talking about it is making people aware of it, and that's the first step. But you could bitch and moan all you want. If it's not taking action, if people aren't taking action because of it, then we end up like Australia.
Right.
And, so the National Caucus though was started because of the Ron Paul revolution of 2008 and 2012. The founder of the caucus started it because he was involved in those two campaigns, and he just talks about how energized people were, how people they didn't care about your different views on certain things and here and that. You could be a centrist libertarian, you could be a right libertarian, you could be even a left libertarian, but Ron Paul was talking about the Fed and inflation. Like no politician talks about that. He was, and that's a big libertarian kind of thing.
Yeah,
is Austrian economics. And he was talking about ending the wars. He even had a great response to heroin legalization, which is not something you should lead with necessarily, but he was asked about it, and he had the perfect response compared to Gary Johnson a few years later, who looked like he was a deer in the headlights, and gave a very unlibertarian response. So it was, hey, we experienced this with Ron Paul, and then when he was done and no longer running, we had nowhere to go with this whole movement, homeless. And Michael Heiss, the founder of the Mises Caucus, said, well, how about the Libertarian Party? That's kind of the natural fit for us. And he was not exactly thrilled with the way things were going. And they weren't the Ron Paul revolution. They had none of this momentum, none of this energy. And so in 2017, after Bill Weld's just disastrous vice presidential campaign where he frankly endorsed Hillary Clinton 3 days before the election.
Yeah, I remember that.
We got to stop this, and we got to bring the Ron Paul revolution back to the liberty movement at large. If you talk to libertarians, I would say probably 60 to 70% of the nation's libertarians don't have anything to do with the Libertarian Party, simply because the Libertarian Party hasn't been useful or effective at even preaching the libertarian message
this would be a good spot for you to chime in, Cap, I feel.
So I actually had a question for this, since I am not well educated on the Libertarian Party in itself. How come but I've known about the Libertarian Party and, several other parties. How can, I understand you guys have this following and this movement, but how come it's always just coming up short? How come there's no one in the news or the media screaming, hey, look, libertarians, A, B, and C? There's very far and few. The only libertarians I know are Ron and Rand Paul and Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec, And I'm sorry to put it that way too, but you don't ever see, there's clearly this following and this hunger for the movement, but there's no champion. There's no big media push for it. And it's hard for me to understand. I know, the way we feel about the media right now, but it's just strange that there is other options and they can't get a word in edgewise.
So I think here's an example from the 2016 election. The media, obviously, if you're coming from the right side of things, the conservative side of things, the media is a joke. Not a joke. They are the enemy. Basically, they purposely obfuscate things, and they have an agenda, for sure. What was happening in the 2016 election was that they gave Gary Johnson a ton of press and media attention until the polls showed that he was actually taking more votes from Hillary than he was from Trump. And then they blacklisted him. They purposefully, just threw the whole Aleppo moment.
Yeah, they made him look like an idiot with that. With the what is Aleppo?
They threw that curveball at him. Now, he should have been able to respond better than he did, but at the same time, that was an out of nowhere question. What do you think of Aleppo? And he's like, because the context of the previous conversations, the conversation that they had up until that point had nothing to do with foreign policy at all. And so all of a sudden, what is Aleppo? Or what do you think of Aleppo? And he says, well, what is Aleppo?
Right.
Now, he responded horribly after that. But that alone, after that, they just ignored him.
Yeah.
Completely. So there you go. If it looks like the Libertarians have if they're going to do anything but wreck a Republican, the media will ignore us. The way we vote is difficult to get in. We don't have a great chance. Ballot access laws. You wouldn't have any idea about that unless you're involved in here. But Connecticut's actually not a bad state for that, but it's still very difficult. If we wanted to run a gubernatorial candidate next year, we need 7,500 signatures from registered voters in the state of Connecticut. That takes time and money to gather. And you don't just need 7,500 because some of them are going to get thrown out as not registered, as not in the state, as whatever. So you need probably 10,000 signatures in order just to make sure that you've got enough to get on the ballot. And that's just to get on the ballot. So we don't have a whole lot of funds because we're a third party and people like winners, especially in America. America's like winners and we haven't won anything. So we're starting up from scratch. That's why I say when Trump's like, I'll just do my own third party. You got the money. You might be able to do a lot better than we do right now. But the two major parties have designed this system to keep themselves in power.
That's what I was going to say, that there's barriers to entry for third parties. And the barriers to entry are written by the two-party system to prevent any, external challenge.
Third party coming in.
Right. And then, the two of them, they govern as if they're a uniparty to begin with. How many times, Chris, have we said that, the budget keeps going up under the conservatives or the liberals? So.
Yep. Yeah. And to give you an idea, we did sue the state. We sued them twice. One for during COVID, they were like, "Oh, you have to stay 6 feet away. You can't go can't go around. You can't be in public places, but you still need to get your signatures." Well, what the hell?
Right? How are you supposed to do that then?
How are you supposed to do that? They were like, "Well, you can get it online now," but it was like such a complicated process that you had to send them to a website. They had to print out the paper to sign it and then scan it in themselves and email it back to you. Like nobody's doing that. Yeah. So we also so unfortunately the court system took too long to issue a judgment on that, so it didn't matter. And then we had before COVID messed everything up, we had a lawsuit just in general for the immense amount of time and effort it takes to get people on the ballot. That if we wanted to run full slates like the Republicans and Democrats do in every town across the state, it would cost us more. It would cost us so much money that the Democrats and Republicans combined couldn't do it, themselves. So, but again, the court system decided that our suit wasn't good enough and threw it out and said, it's fine that the laws that are current are justified and fine. Mm-hmm. You just need to deal with it. So that's one of the main reasons.
That's crazy. See, I'm pretty sure nobody even knew about that either.
Yeah.
Right. Also, we've done a terrible job. We've been around for 50 years. The party itself has been around for 50 years and done a terrible job of marketing itself.
I agree.
That's the thing that I'm surprised about, knowing that there is this following, where's the campaign? Where's the people on TV?
I feel like most people are libertarian too. They might not even know that they are. And in 2016, which we were talking about before, it was a huge missed opportunity, in my opinion. Even myself, I didn't know that much about the Libertarian Party, but I kind of understood a little bit. And you had two candidates running for president, Trump and Hillary. I hated both of them, right? So I did vote for Gary Johnson, and I thought, all right, he's pretty chill dude, seems all right. But like we were talking about before, the whole thing got tanked as soon as he got a little wind in his sails.
He wasn't the greatest. He honestly
wasn't the greatest. No, Right.
You know, and Joe Jorgensen was a disaster.
Yes.
We had a huge opportunity this time because Biden was
right.
I thought for sure 2020 could have been your guys' year. I like, you know.
Believe us, we know. We were really we had a candidate. He sabotaged himself by going. We didn't have enough numbers at the 2020 convention, which was derailed anyway in large respect due to COVID. So now we had like online convention or whatever, which totally it was crazy. But we had a guy who would have been, I think, much better in a lot of respects, and would have been a lot bolder, and it would have taken a lot more risks, which is what you needed in 2020. And he derailed himself by going after some of the other candidates, and we didn't have enough votes to overcome the middle of the roaders who were at the convention who said, I don't like that he attacked other libertarians. So we lost that. Huge opportunities. We're going to get another one in 2024 because I guarantee you the two candidates, one of them is going to be Kamala Harris, who's the worst.
Right.
Are they going to, I mean, is the GOP going to nominate DeSantis? I don't think so. It's going to be somebody like Nikki Haley. I don't know. Maybe
I don't know.
Well, that's so hard to predict because you know Trump is still in the fold also. As much as some people don't think he is, he is. So
yeah. But you know what?
Way old.
They're already hunting down DeSantis. Every time Biden speaks, you got to throw a little shade to DeSantis. So he's the one that they're scared of the most.
That makes me think. Right. That makes me think that they know he is going to run.
Yeah. So
hey, that'll be an interesting. That'll be a little interesting because I know a lot of libertarians who are right-leaning libertarians who may, especially in battleground states, who would vote for him, where they might not have voted for. Well, they certainly wouldn't vote for Nikki Haley or somebody like that.
In terms of the Mises Caucus, man, I'm really hoping that Dave Smith decides to run, even if it's just as a speaking tour, as he's said it himself. You know, the person who put me onto the Mises Caucus was Dave Smith, and he's changed my mind on a lot of the issues. So I feel like
really hoping for that too.
Giving him the soapbox or the parapet or whatever you want to call it, at least, you know, he might change a lot more people's minds or wake a lot more people up. So I'm hoping that happens.
And hey, look at what the Ron Paul revolution was. It was a presidential campaign. It was a primary campaign. It was, and compared to 2012, 2024, there's so many more avenues to speak. You know, before in 2008, 2012, you had to be on the debate stage. Nobody's watching. Now you have podcast. I mean, you can go on Joe Rogan again.
Right.
And get in front of millions of ears, and who knows what other podcasts. Of course, Kennedy has them on. Gutfeld has them on. I'm sure Tucker Carlson, the biggest name in Fox News, would probably have him on, especially if he's excluded from the debate. Maybe not. We'll see. There's a huge opportunity in 2024 too, and the Mises Caucus doesn't really go for. They don't focus on larger races, except for the one goal of the presidential race is going to be get that message out, reignite some passion in the libertarian movement. A lot of those Ron Paul people who are disgusted with the Libertarian Party, let's get them back in action and build a base that can knock on doors for local town council races, city commissioner races, things like that, county commissioner races.
I agree with that 100%. Go ahead.
Hold on a second, though. You're saying you have that one goal of the presidency, but why isn't the party trying to break it up throughout the Senate and the House as well?
So the party is when you're talking about just a U.S. House race,
mm-hmm.
the average spending on U.S. House races for the two major parties is over $1 million. There's just not the funds for a third party, and
so that's why you got the one goal.
Yeah. So the president is not going to win the presidency. I mean, it would take a miracle, right, for Dave Smith to get in the White House.
Well, that's what they said about Trump, so there's hope.
But he was a Republican. Yeah. I'm telling you, when people go to the polls, they are scared to death of the other team.
Yes.
And unless we change the way we vote, to something like ranked choice voting or approval voting or star voting or whatever it is, all the different alternatives that are out there. Unless we choose to do something like that, I really don't see when conservatarians show up to the polls and they're in a battleground state, they aren't voting for a third party because God forbid the Democrat gets in there.
Right.
Same thing, centrist Democrats.
And that becomes a talking point of the campaigns too. Like, you can't risk. I think I've heard Bernie Sanders say it before. Like, yes, we want to support third parties, but it's too important right now to risk voting for one.
It's always the most important election of the lifetime.
Yeah. I was just about to say that.
Oh, I'm sorry I robbed you.
Every election is the most important election of our lifetime, and they want it that way. Because they keep the power. The only way an outsider gets in, like AOC, is if she primaries. If you're in a heavily, like a Democrat area or a heavily Republican area, you primary the guy who's been in there for forever and is kind of lackadaisical.
Yeah, Joe Crowley, right.
These people have buckets of money that third parties simply don't have. They're not on the ballot yet anyway, so they got to knock on doors to get in, signatures to get on the ballot. House races and especially Senate races, very, very difficult to make any headway in. I mean, we had a decent radical libertarian running in Georgia for the Senate, and they blame him for the Democrats, winning those two, because had he not been in that one race, it's possible that the Republican would have won. Wait, another reason for Republicans to get on board with ranked choice voting, because I almost guarantee you the Republican would have won with ranked choice voting, where he didn't win later on because Stacey Abrams had 2 more months to figure out how to get that election.
What I think would be a really simple, very, very simple fix to some voting issues is if they stop putting what party you are affiliated with on the ballot. So the ballot shouldn't say Joe Biden D, Donald Trump R. It should just say their names, because that will eliminate some people just voting for Team Red and voting for Team Blue. They'll now just have names, and if they're completely ignorant of what's going on or who these people
so you're trying to get lucky votes in?
No, you might encourage people to do 5 minutes of research at least into who they're even voting for, instead of having those
thinking's the enemy.
Instead of having those like people who are just laser, blue anon people, or the the MAGA people who are in a cult of personality, worshiping Trump. I need people to do a little bit more critical thinking, as you were saying, and maybe that's one way you could get it. Because I've been to the polls before, and and then I look at some of the down ballot people, and I got no idea who they are. So I've literally, even at the ballot box, got on my phone and Googled, them to try and make some sort of educated decision on it. But who's going to really do that? Most people won't.
So the nonpartisan elections, which is what you're describing, basically is going to work best at the local level, where nobody knows who anybody is anyway. Right. Obviously, with president, it ain't going to work. You're going to know.
You're going to know. Yeah.
You're going to know who the 2 main parties are, and the media is going to ignore any third party.
True.
So it's not going to work there, but it certainly could at local levels, maybe even state house levels, state senate levels.
See, I think that's worth it, though.
It might have a trickle up effect, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, maybe. And I agree that is that's certainly an option. Ranked choice voting is coming in. I don't think that's going to be the golden goose here.
Could you briefly explain ranked choice? Cap, are you familiar with ranked choice?
I kind of have an idea of what it is, but I'm not 100%.
Yeah. So in races where only one winner, which is most of the state house, U.S. House, that kind of thing, instead of just check marking the box next to the name you want, the candidate you want, and then going about your business, just one vote, you rank them in order of preference. So let's just take the 2016 election or even the 2020 election. I don't like Trump or Biden enough to vote for them. My real preference is for Joe Jorgensen, maybe someone else. So if I'm going to the polls and I'm in a battleground state, I could say, Joe Jorgensen is unlikely to win. I'm not going to vote for her. I'm going to have to vote for Trump so that Biden doesn't win. A lot of my family did that. A lot of my friends in Pennsylvania did that because it was a battleground state. They felt they had to. Well, with ranked choice voting, I could say, well, I'm going to rank Joe Jorgensen first, and then I'll put Trump second, or even a third party second, and then Trump third, just as long as he's ahead of Biden. The way it's counted then is like a runoff, like the Georgia runoffs. If no candidate gets 50% in the first round of voting, no candidate gets the first rankings, they count those first. If no candidate gets 50% of the first rankings, or a majority of the first rankings, then they eliminate the lowest vote getter. So say that's Joe Jorgensen. If Joe Jorgensen was the lowest vote getter, then she's eliminated. All the votes, all the ballots that had her as the first choice get transferred to their second choice. So most of them would probably be Trump, but to be honest, with Joe Jorgensen's BLM fiasco, it could have been Biden too. They're transferred over, and this happens each round until somebody gets a majority. So what it does is it eliminates the spoiler effect. No longer do you go to the polls and think, I can't vote for a Libertarian, I can't vote for a Green Party, I can't vote for a Constitution Party, because if I do, then the evil team could win. I need to give my vote to the least bad of the two major teams. Well,
that's not actually a bad idea.
Yeah, I think New York City just did this for their primary for the mayor, which might explain why Eric Adams won the Democrat. I'm not 100% sure if this is accurate or not, but Eric Adams won the Democratic side, and he was maybe the least crazy of the Democratic candidates. So maybe it worked somewhat for him.
Yeah. So had it happened differently. So unfortunately, typically, Democrats and more left-leaning people advocate for this. They put it in, and I don't really know why. I'm very familiar with the system. I advocate for it myself. We actually use it in the Libertarian Party.
I'm going to go with uneducated.
I don't know. All I know is they advocate it more, and they got it passed in Maine. And the first time they used it in 2018, the incumbent Republican had the most first rankings, but barely. But it was also less than 50%. And then when they eliminated the other three candidates, the Democrat came out on top because the other three candidates had him higher on the rankings.
Right.
And so from that point on, Republicans are like, it's a terrible system because
it didn't work.
They tried something new once,
and it failed to reelect their guy. Meanwhile, had they had it in 2018 in Kentucky, it's possible that they wouldn't have had the governor Beshear, who's been awful, the Democrat, won. And I think the Libertarian candidate had like 5 times the number of votes to the margin. So it's unlikely that the Democrat would have won had the Libertarian not been in the race. And had they ranked choice voting, all those Libertarian votes would have been transferred over to one of the two major parties, and it's likely that the Republican would have ended up winning. Now, would they have been better than Beshear? Probably a little bit, but you've seen some of these Republican governors with COVID. They weren't that much better.
They weren't as They were not that much better.
Two wings of government attached to the same bird.
Yeah, very few of them would have been Kristi Noem, I guarantee.
Right. I do think it's honestly a good idea worth exploring because it'll take away the fear of my vote's going to be wasted. That's
the main thing.
It'll encourage people to vote for like the person you actually want, and then if that doesn't work out, your backup is the lesser of two evils.
It works just like a runoff. You can think of it just like a runoff. If you go into an election and there's a million names on there, you vote for the person you want first. They don't make it to the next round, or typically with a runoff there's only top 2. But if they don't make it to the end, well, then you can always go to the next round. There's just not a space. It's called, in fact, ranked choice voting originally was called instant runoff voting. So it's the same thing. It's just a runoff election, only done instantly as opposed to 2 months later. That's not a specific. The Libertarian Party of Connecticut advocates for that, but that's not a specific Libertarian Mises Caucus thing. But I just thought I'd mention that. But again, why isn't the Libertarian Party big?
Funding.
funding hard
Money
to win elections. And you know what? A lot of people say, why would I put in time and effort into a party that isn't going to win? And I think what ends up happening is there's conservatarians out there. They'll agree with libertarians on they'll agree with libertarians on more things than they agree with the Republicans on. But a couple of things will stick with them. Libertarians have, some are closed borders on immigration. Others are open borders on immigration. Most are actually in the middle there. But because they're not like a firm stance on something, and immigration is the #1 issue for someone, I only agree with the Republicans on 50%, but it's that immigration issue. I can't be a libertarian, even though I agree with them on 80% of everything else. Same thing with abortion, pro-life. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to pro-life people. They agree with libertarians on almost everything, but because the platform is ostensibly pro-choice, they can't deal with it. Okay, it's one thing. We can even work to, manipulate the if there's enough people, the platform can change a little bit. Maybe just delete that plank. So each candidate, you can be a pro-life candidate for libertarians, it can be a pro-choice candidate for libertarians, and all that. But I've seen so many Republican, conservative, libertarians. Really, they agree with me on almost everything. And I'm pro-life, and I'm not for open borders myself. So we pretty much agree on everything. But I'll go with the Republicans. Why do they go with the Republicans when they agree with the libertarians on most things? Because the Republicans win. If the libertarians won, and they agreed with libertarians, they would say, yeah, I don't like the abortion plank, but I agree with this party more than I agree with the Democrats.
It's kind of like, sorry to interrupt. It's kind of like basically what we've seen over the past decade of footballs. It's been real easy to be a Patriots fan. When the Yankees were hot, it's real easy to be, you know what I mean? You might love your home team, but the Patriots keep winning. So I'm,
fair weather.
I could see how
fans. Yeah. Like you said before, people love a winner. I do think you're also right. There are certain issues that are deal breakers for people in a way. I'd consider maybe Second Amendment issues a deal breaker for myself. If you're any candidate and you come and tell me, I want to pass more gun restrictions, I'm done with you. Like, I ain't ever supporting you or having to hear anything else you have to say. So I hate to be that way, but there are certain things that are just lines in the sand. The COVID passports and restrictions, that's another line in the sand for me. I ain't ever, giving any other candidate consideration who's going to support the vaccine passport, which we'll get into a little bit of that, or more restrictions because of that. That you're done, with me. Even like podcasters or YouTubers, if I see any of them, try and justify it or rationalize it. I recently mentioned Kyle Kalinske. He's a pretty popular leftist. I enjoyed him. He's dead to me now because he threw a little bit of support behind Biden's vax mandate thing. I couldn't believe it. So, there are lines in the sand for everybody.
The vax mandate stuff this is our hill. This is the hill to die on because they can do that.
Right. They could do anything.
There's nothing stopping them.
Yeah. I mean, this is the crazy stuff about that is that it's just a shot. And we've been doing this for public schools anyway. It's just a boxcar.
It's just 2 weeks. It's
what's something interesting. We were talking about Rothbard before, and I just read Anatomy of the State for the first time, and it really is eye-opening. I gave it to Chris. He's still got to read it.
I lost it at a party.
There's a line in there that stuck with me that I remember, and it's about the Supreme Court and ruling on constitutionality or not constitutional. And I believe it said something in terms of if the Supreme Court is supposed to be the great check on if something is constitutional or unconstitutional, they could be used also as a way to just justify or rationalize something being constitutional that really isn't constitutional. For example, this vax mandate thing, I'm sure it's going to go to the Supreme Court, with lawsuits or whatever. And for some reason, it gets, some behind the scenes machination happens and the administration is able to convince the Supreme Court to rule that it is constitutional. Okay, they say it's constitutional now. Is it not tyranny now all of a sudden? No, it still is tyranny. It still is wrong. But now they've used the excuse of, the Supreme Court has ruled it's constitutional. So the Supreme Court and the ruling on if something is constitutional or not can almost be used as a weapon to further tyranny, I guess, if that makes any sense to you guys.
So I think it's an anatomy of the state. It could be an ethics of liberty too, but I think it's an anatomy of the state where he says we have to. He talks about, it's a very similar thing, which is why I'm bringing it up. He talks about how we have to ditch this idea that we are the government, because he says, like, if 51% of the population decides to murder the other 49%,
right,
and they have a vote, and the government then does so and commits this horrible genocide, we don't think of it, and we can't possibly. It's totally illogical to think of it as the 49% murdered themselves, right? Because they weren't the government.
Right.
We aren't the government. And it's very similar in that, does calling ourselves the government, or does having democracy do it? Does it make something that's horribly wrong right now? No, it doesn't. Things are horribly wrong because of something outside of this idea of democracy. It's something outside the idea of that, well, if the government's doing it, it's okay, because there were representatives that voted for it, or something like no taxation without representation. Well, even if I have representation and he decides to tax me, it's still not okay, right? I mean, this is still my money he's taking from me, just because, he's a representative of mine, or he's the government and I didn't leave. This is the other thing. Like, oh, if you don't like the government here, you can always leave. Like, right. No, this is my house. Not leaving my property because you've decided that you can do what you want with it. Like, we have to stop it. And that's basically the fundamentals of libertarianism is you own your body, you own tangible property because you own your body, and nobody has the right to interfere with those things without your permission. Nobody has the right to, and most of the time we've been okay. The body thing was undebatable. It was, nobody has the right to force you to do something with your body that you don't want to do. Well, until now, which is the scariest part, because that's the most fundamental thing. But even the property, like, most of us understand somebody doesn't have the right to come on your property and do something that you don't want them to do. And the only difference between libertarianism and most people who understand these things is that libertarians don't make exceptions for government agents. Just because you're a government agent, just because you slapped police on your shirt, or you're some sort of representative that got voted in, doesn't mean that you can come onto my property and do what you want with it, or tell me I can't put a shed, 12 feet from the property line or something like that.
You can't fly a flag or all those stupid HOA rules and just
HOA, yeah, sure. HOAs are tricky because in some respects they might be libertarian, but most of them have these government privileges, and it's a weird kind of amalgamation of state and HOA. Like, it's not just I bought this house knowing what the rules were, so I can't really, like, I don't feel like that's a justifiable argument for the government. I bought this house knowing that there were taxes. Yeah, but that's not the same thing as, like, here's a small HOA where, and I could be wrong on this too, because a lot of libertarians argue against HOAs just from this very nature. But they're like they're more private agreements, whereas I don't have to buy a house with an HOA. I have to buy a house where a government tells me I have to pay taxes or I get evicted, right? There's like nowhere that exists at this point.
You know what I kind of view that as like a hippie commune in a way. And from what I've come to understand, if we have like a completely anarchist capitalist society, you could still have a communist commune within that society. Yeah. If you agree to join that, that's on you. That's, as long as you don't come and violate my property or anything like that. What do I care what you're doing? So that's kind of the way I see it in HOA. You're agreeing to join that community and pay the dues and whatever. No one forces you to do that. But then you can't come from that. Like, there is one nearby where I live here. They can't come over here to my house and be like, well, you have to give us dues now because you live nearby or something like that.
Right. And that's it's interesting you mentioned the community thing, because that's how Hans Hermann Hoppe, he said in, I believe it's The Way Forward or What Must Be Done, I think it was. Could be one of those. I'm not as familiar with his work. But he talks about covenant community. This is how we have libertarianism in our lifetime, as we form covenant communities. And it's kind of like HOAs, where there's some agreements. I want to live in a community that shares my cultural beliefs. I'm more of a conservative family man. I don't want libertinism. I don't want drugs and sex orgies out on the front lawn of my neighbor. Like, I don't want to live next to these kind of people.
Sure.
Totally cool if you want to. Just make sure you stay away from my property. And in order to preserve that, maybe we form this HOA kind of community. But see, that's a voluntary thing. There's no state law that says certain things and restricts certain things. That's more of just I'm buying this property. I'm making sure that my neighbors are similar in values. And that's one way, as Pete Quinones says, 10,000 Liechtensteins, right? Liechtenstein is this tiny little, principality. I mean, they have a prince. It's their leader, the actual prince. But they're one of the freest nations in the world. They have, and they're small enough and decentralized enough. They don't have an army that's out there bombing people and taxing you to kill people. And how do we form 10,000 Liechtensteins? Maybe it's not full anarcho-capitalism like we might like, but hey, it's a heck of a lot better than now. I'm totally cool with that. And I think a lot of libertarians, a lot of the Mises Caucus would totally be on board with that kind of thinking. It's just that's what the Free State Project in some respects is, only they're doing it as a whole state.
Yeah, that's what I was telling you, Chris, about in New Hampshire. Libertarians have like the Free State Project. They're working on basically making a libertarian state. If they can.
Well, it started in 2002, I think. It's been going on for a while, and they what they did was they said, all right, we're going to have to sign up online. Anybody who signs up is pledging to move to New Hampshire once we trigger 20,000 signups. And we're going to make this happen. And they actually triggered the 20,000 in 2015, so it took them like 13 years to get there.
Wow.
Lots of people had moved early. Of course, out of the 20,000, how many life changed? Some of them died. Some of them had families.
Yeah, life happens.
Life happens. But yeah, they're really starting now. 6 years after the move was triggered, I'm seeing changes up there that are significant. I mean, and I don't know if you know this, Skaggs, but their Speaker of the House is a Rothbardian.
Really?
Yes, the Speaker of the House of the New Hampshire House of Representatives is a Rothbardian libertarian. He ran as a Republican.
That's encouraging.
Another thing that helps the New Hampshire libertarians up there. Most of them are running not as one of the two major parties, but they have 400 in the House of Representatives. They have less than half of the population that Connecticut has, and they have 2.5 times the number of representatives. So they have a representative, like one representative per 3,600 or 3,700 people.
Mm-hmm.
It's these small, tiny districts. You can knock on all those doors.
Right.
You can be known in your district. It's a little bit easier for a third party to even get involved because of how small that is, and it requires less money to do. So that's another thing that I advocate here, just on my own time, is just increasing the size of the House of Representatives. You might say, "Oh, that's more government, more politicians." Yeah, but the power of each one is diluted a little bit.
Yes, I agree.
You're more accountable to the smaller district you have. It's a little easier for you to have competition. One of the reasons why the U.S. Senate and U.S. House of Representatives is so difficult for people to break into is because of how big it is. You're talking about 750,000 people in each U.S. House district. You're not getting any traction in there unless you've got lots of money. And these
makes the world go around.
These big parties, they have the big donors. They can drop $1 to $2 million on their House race, and you can drop about 15,000. Awesome. You're not winning that race. It's not happening.
Yeah, some more barriers to entry. So let's you got anything else, Cap, before we change gears here and talk some news? So I got one news story maybe we could discuss a little bit, which I think is an interesting cross between maybe culture war stuff, government overreach. And this is last week. There was a restaurant in Manhattan that apparently kicked out some. Let me see. I got it here. Kicked out
Carmines.
Carmines, yes. And sorry, we're right here. So an incident at Carmines last week in Manhattan, wherein 3 Black women from Texas were charged for assaulting a hostess at the restaurant, allegedly over a vaccine verification dispute. And as a lawyer for one woman subsequently claimed, because the hostess, who is of Asian descent, used a racial slur. A lawyer representing Carmines has disputed the allegation about racial slur. Video footage of the incident includes no audio, but it can be seen that 3 women were being led inside by a member of the staff who was not the hostess. But once inside, the hostess is seen exiting to return her post when all 3 customers turn to follow her back outside. One of them approaches the hostess from behind and begins speaking as the others circled, and a fight ensues. So I'm going to pull a receipt here from previous podcast episodes. And I said, and I believe you said the same thing, Chris, that when they enacted this key to NYC pass or whatever, that they were going to, it was public knowledge that the Black community in New York City was one of the least vaccinated communities. And this is essentially enacting a version of some sort of systemic racism that was going to disproportionately affect them. They wouldn't be able to go to work. They won't be able to go to restaurants and participate in society the way every normal person does. And this was the Democrats doing it, right? So now here you have an example of that happening. You have, a couple of Black people go to a restaurant, and I don't know the exact situation behind their papers. Give me your papers. Were their papers right?
I assume they weren't vaccinated.
And now they're pissed, right? Now Black Lives Matter has come out, and they had a protest there on Monday, and I'm going to share this.
Which is shocking because it's not an election year.
But hey, I'll take it. I'll take the fight against this, however we can get it. So the Black Lives Matter of Greater New York leader blasts vaccine mandates as racist and disrespectful. Mayor Bill de Blasio aggressively pushed a vaccine passport system that bars entries to restaurants, blah, blah, blah. But with Black residents lagging overall, the rules are disproportionately affecting a minority group, usually in step with Democratic policies. Hawk Newsom is a Black activist and co-founder of Black Lives Matter of Greater New York. And he founded the group with his sister. Newsom spoke with the Washington Examiner about the difficulties vaccine-hesitant Blacks are facing in the era of medical passports. We are not anti-vaxxers. Some of us are vaccinated. It's an individual's choice. No one should be forced to put something in someone's bodies. That is music to my ears.
I said this to you, Skaggs. I go, wow, what a turn of events would it be if like BLM turns a corner and saves America from vaccine mandates? Like, burnt it down one summer, next summer we're going to save you guys. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Hey, I am all for that. That'd be awesome. And one thing I could say about the Black Lives Matter, the organization as a whole, especially the national organization, is a Marxist.
Right.
It's a trap. I don't even know if it's like, I don't think it was grassroots. It's like a CIA trap.
Yes, I agree. Probably something like that.
But some of the local chapters, I do think, are legit in their quest for criminal justice reform,
right.
Police reform, and things like that. It does surprise me that this happened, but not really, because everybody knew. So like 70% of the Black community in New York City was unvaccinated, and you're now like basically telling them they can't function in the real world. I mean, this Jim Crovid, as I've been calling it, which it's striking to me. And meanwhile, the woke white liberals are cheering, which just goes to show you exactly where they come from. It has nothing to do with sincere beliefs about the impoverished African American community. I love it, and I think, and one of the things that the Mises Caucus is big on is issue coalitions. But we don't have to agree on everything. But if we agree on something, that one thing, we can work together to make change. And
unity, you mean? Jesus.
Yeah, no, seriously. The founder, he's in a Democrat town in Pennsylvania, just outside of Philly. And he went to the police chief and said, "Look, I'm gonna work on. I really want to push marijuana legalization here in the county, or the town even. I don't even know." And the guy was like, "Yeah, you know what? It's time." And this is like a sheriff or something. And he went to all the local left-leaning drug legalization groups, and they went into the town council, which was mostly Democrat, and convinced them to pass the ordinance that decriminalized marijuana in his county. And he was working with a whole bunch of Democrats, even though there's no way he's a Democrat. and that's the way. I know the Mises Caucus, I think in Denver, was working with left-leaning groups to decriminalize psilocybin, the mushrooms. And I know the Mises Caucus in, I think it's Washington State, was with another leftist group that was anti-war. The very few anti-war leftists that are still around.
Yeah, they've become the neocons now for the most part.
Yeah, the war hawk
is crazy.
Yeah.
It's nuts how things change so quickly. But yeah, issue coalitions. I've actually been thinking in Connecticut, because there's local chapters. I think there's a chapter in Bridgeport. There might be a little bit larger than just one city, but find out if these local chapters are legit interested in actual change that isn't like this stupid defund the police, which is so nebulous and impossible to do anyway. I was thinking maybe the Libertarian Party of Connecticut can work with these local BLM chapters to do two things: decriminalize drugs in specific cities, because that's where it's going to be the easiest to do, and then also help fund and establish or work with something that's already established, rehab centers or addiction centers, because it's not like decriminalizing it makes automatically
everybody's life better.
Yeah.
Right. The vast majority of people are not going to go be like, oh, it's decriminalized, I'm going to go try heroin now. These people have already tried it while it was illegal. Just because it's now slightly easier, I don't think it's going to make a difference. Besides, if they do want to try it, if they were going to try it anyway, if we can get them to have it where it's not laced with fentanyl, where it's much purer, safer dose. I mean, there's just a million reasons for these people's sake why it should be decriminalized. And if the Libertarian Party of Connecticut isn't going to be able to do it on their own, for one, we're not big enough, and we don't have the funds enough. But if we can work with a group that's ostensibly formed for this very purpose, not decriminalization, but for criminal justice reform. Well, if it's decriminalized, that's the number one reason why African Americans and police have hostile engagement.
Right.
Is because drugs are criminalized. And so if we can work on that together, that'd be awesome. Now, I have no idea if the local chapters are up for it, but I'm going to see on the nationwide, talk to the New York City Mises Caucus people and see if there's any interest or any ability for them to
reach out
to the BLM, and work on the vaccine mandate thing.
That's a good thing, man. I'm all for that. Dialogue is key. One of the things I didn't like about the situation with this restaurant in Manhattan is the protests came to the restaurant and was very aggressive with the people working at the restaurant. The way I look at that is, I get it, you're mad, but those are just other normal people who
probably agree with you.
Right. And they're just normal people. It wasn't the restaurant who is wielding that power over the people or enacted that policy. It was Mayor de Blasio and the government of New York City who did. The same guy who painted that Black Lives Matter mural on the floor in front of Trump Towers and was dancing around after he did so. That's the guy you should be really aiming your ire or your protest at, not other normal powerless people. Yep. And you ever seen The Lord of the Rings, Stephen?
Yeah, I love The Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
So the way when I read this situation, it reminded me of the Council of, I'm a big Lord of the Rings nerd, right? So it reminded me of the Council of Elrond, and they were presented with the ring. Here's the problem: the ring of power. It's evil. And Boromir says, we should take this ring and use it as a gift against our enemies. And Aragorn says, you cannot wield it. It'll corrupt you. There's nothing we could do. It can only be destroyed. And they get into this huge, big argument. And as everybody at the council's fighting, you could see their reflection in the ring of them all fighting fire. You could hear Sauron in the background, menacing, laughing, enjoying this division, this fighting between everybody. That's Bill de Blasio. Normal people here are fighting each other over his, government-controlled policy, and he's in the background like, yes, good.
Division.
Right. I see it, it's a stupid reference, but that's the way I see it as.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that Dave Smith has mentioned, so you'll be familiar with it. That's how the whole woke identity politics BS started. They were at Occupy Wall Street attacking the real enemies there. Now, They probably didn't have very good solutions because they're leftists and they don't know economics at all. But they were attacking the banks, which at this point are not independent in any way. They're state actors at this point. They're so heavily regulated and so interconnected. I mean, every U.S. Treasury secretary is former Goldman Sachs guy anyway. So it's very clear that these bankers are not innocent at all. So they were attacking the right group, the Federal Reserve. They might not have known what that was, but that's the banking system we have. They were after the banks. And then all of a sudden, now less than a year later, we have the woke racism is everywhere kind of stuff. It's a corporate plot, man, or a state. It's a state
conspiracy,
plot.
or as I like to say, a spoiler.
Hey, it's. I think it's legit that this was not an organic woke movement here going on. This was a concerted effort to keep the leftists from attacking the right, enemies.
Right, from keeping people as enemies. When you think your common, when you think your neighbor is your enemy, you're never gonna, band together and form a coalition that will get something done or make a change that you might like.
Yep.
Well, that's the whole point of the History of the People book you were reading.
Oh, People's History of the United States.
History, yeah.
It's a tactic that's been deployed throughout, the American government since the beginning. I believe it was originally, make sure that the poor white folk and the Native Americans and the slaves hated each other, because if they were ever to, band together and try and, make some sort of improvement upon their lives, that would threaten the elite of the time. So they gave the poor whites like free land, use them as like a buffer between the Native Americans and etc. So it's always been a tactic deployed by the elite.
It works. It certainly does. But I do hope that the BLM of the Greater New York is just the first one, and that these groups can start to really work towards something that we can align with them on. I mean, it's not like we don't align with them on criminal justice reform anyway, but It's very difficult to do that when the national group is very Marxist, when they're not necessarily attacking government buildings, they're attacking private property.
Right. That's my biggest criticism of them. And that's my criticism again here. It's you're attacking other normal people who are not really directly responsible for what your objective is. Your ire is misplaced. During the riots, that was our biggest criticism. I fully get, I vibe with the sentiment and I have sympathy for everything, but it doesn't mean you go and burn down some random person's business, who probably supports you. You don't know how every person feels about a situation.
I mean, and who knows? I see people claiming that was different groups. Some of them say white supremacy groups. I think that's bogus. I really think it's more the feds,
right?
Yeah, that are doing most. So
agent provocateurs.
Right. I mean, you see the J6, the Justice for J6 or whatever. Yeah. That was a
Fed Fest.
You want to go down the black hole? That's Chris's. Realm.
Fed Fest.
That was funny the other day. Fed Fest. There were so many feds at the rally the other day that they're arresting themselves.
Yep. Yes, because nobody else showed up. Hopefully, that was the same thing. I was trying to say this here. I don't know. It was probably like January 17th or something like that, like 3 days before the inauguration or something. And they're like, the Democrats here in my town where I am, it's difficult to speak.
Same.
Yeah, to speak. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. So they were like, haha, like they must have got the date wrong or blah blah blah, and I'm like, this was clearly a Fed trap. I mean, there was no possible way that this January 17th thing was legit. Like, I know nobody who was planning on going, and I'm not necessarily conservative or in the conservative, Republican things in the town, but like, it was so obvious that all of these things were that. And I didn't even know about this Justice for J6 thing until the funny story about the feds arresting the feds, or the Capitol Police. The guy who arrested the Capitol Police guy.
The funny thing with the J6 thing, I didn't know about it until people started posting not to go to it.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I try and, on our podcast, Instagram, etc. We try and follow everybody every sort of political leaning. So we follow a lot of MAGA diehard people, and all of them, I didn't know of it either. Like you're saying, Chris, that it was going down. I didn't know of it myself until like Cat Turd, who's like a MAGA, like mascot, was like, don't go to this thing. It's fake. It's a trap. And then Trump himself came out and said it. So, yeah.
Well, see, I didn't even know that. That's pretty funny. Because unfortunately, I actually joined Twitter in 2000. I originally joined in 2009, but didn't do anything with it. But I rejoined in 2016 and started getting back on because of Trump. I was like, I got to find out what this guy's saying on there. And now that he's gone, it's definitely less fun.
Yeah, it's I'm on there a lot. It's a good way to get information and news right from the source, but it's also a cesspool and a war zone. Yeah,
I've actually found it to be fun because trolling is fun to me. But I often say Twitter is where I find my my news. Like
me too.
I find out what's going on in the world so much faster being on Twitter than because I don't watch the garbage that they have on TV. And where else? I'm not going to be on their websites. I'm not going to be on CNN or whatever, and or any of that. But the fastest way, like Twitter, is the fastest way to learn anything's going on. That's actually how I knew about the about J6 when it was happening. Was Twitter?
Right.
I was
people
at work.
Posting
I was at work. I wasn't watching anything or doing anything. So
I was actually watching it at work, and I remember this. Like the security guard came in. It was like they broke in, get everyone off the house floor, and I was like, "What the just happened?"
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, did you see they released the videos recently?
Yes, some new videos. Yes, today I believe security videos that were being blocked. Yeah,
I posted about it. I was like, "LOL, look at this horrible insurrection."
Right, it was just guys calmly walking around with American flags.
Yeah, walking in between the velvet ropes.
Yeah, it was hysterical. This is the worse than 9/11, thing.
Oh man, whoever on the 20th anniversary of 9/11 said that this is no longer the worst day in American history. There's no whatever type of new world we begin, they can't be part of it. Just there's nothing left. If you truly think that there's nothing left for you.
You know what I think is something we should keep our eye on. That's going to be interesting. The 1 year anniversary of January 6th. I can't imagine the pageantry that they're going to probably put on, probably a moment of silence. Da, da, da. Yeah. I'm sure they're going to have the whole
for the inconvenience.
The whole thing. Yeah. Right.
We'll see. Maybe we'll get a day off.
The reason why is because that is their cathedral. I mean, that is their holy temple.
Yeah, hit them on the home turf.
Yeah, I mean, it's a religion.
That's where BLM should have been rioting and protesting. If you really wanted all the reform and the change, don't burn down my local Target. Go to the house. Go to the
the Capitol building.
The Capitol, yeah, and start going crazy.
Well, we're not encouraging anybody or inciting anybody to go do that. But we're speaking theoretically here.
Yeah, I mean, what's the point of burning down your local corner store of the guy who probably supports your cause? Now you turned him into an enemy.
Yeah. That's what the first riot in Minneapolis after George Floyd. First place they went to was the police department, and that made sense. Now I'm not exactly saying you should go burn it down, which is what they tried to do. But if you're going to protest where that was who killed you. That was who killed the guy. Go to the police department. Why are you protesting somewhere else? It doesn't make any sense. Go to your government buildings. Protest outside of them. Don't be violent, obviously, because that's not going to work, for one.
And they're waiting. They're waiting for us to get violent again. They are. Right. That's what I'm starting to even think, like, the things were just more and more tidbits. I really think like things are becoming so blatantly stupid and out of control that they are like trying to edge us into like pushing us over the edge. You know what I mean? Like got General Milley committing treason and a coup, basically Afghan pullout, crisis at the border, all these different things. Just how much can really go wrong before one guy just says F this and goes off the deep end, and then they have the justification for whatever they want.
You know what I think? I think I said this recently. What could be something to say about that is all the videos of the hypocrisy of the AOC at the Met Gala, of the mayor of London at a club dancing without a mask on. The more and more of those things that happen and people see, the more and more it's pushing some random guy who's getting more and more angry every time. Eventually, you know what I mean? Who feels like that anger of rules for me, but not for thee. That's going to eventually probably push somebody over the edge, and then they'll do something, and then that will be used as justification to take away more liberties or more patriot acts or
yeah,
whatever.
that's going to be. I mean, because that's what the during the January 6th thing, I was like, this is so dumb. This is so dumb. It will serve no purpose. You're not doing any I mean, I was like, thank God it was less violent than it could have been, but it doesn't matter. Obviously, we know now, 9 months later, they've done nothing but paint it as like the worst thing that could ever happen.
Those people are still in solitary confinement.
It's insane. It's insane.
Yeah, political prisoners. Not beneath America.
This again shouldn't surprise you. Look at Irwin Schiff for not paying income tax. The dude was chained to he's dying of cancer. They chained him to his hospital bed because he dared defy the IRS.
Yep. You don't want to do that. Yeah. That's the worst thing you could possibly do. You know what's something I just saw today? David Hale, I believe his name is, who was kind of a whistleblower on drone strike, civilian casualties. He's in jail for an insane amount of time for whistleblowing. Yet the Pentagon and whatnot just carried out that drone strike a few weeks ago that killed, it's confirmed 10 civilians and children. None of them are going to face any accountability for actually murdering people. But the guy who whistleblows on the fact that drone strikes murder innocent people, that guy's in jail for 40 years or whatever it is.
Yeah,
that's insane.
It is. And as people are getting angry about this, I mean, the best advice I could give is certainly do not get violent. That is what they want. And it's not going to work. This is not 1775 where you have a whole, militia that can stand up to an army, and barely. That was a risk they took. This is not the same thing as they're coming for your guns. Because that's what the British were doing. The best thing that we can do is just try to convince as many of our neighbors as possible to not comply with the insanity. If they want to do mask mandates, don't put on a mask. If they want to do vaccine passports, just go to the restaurant. I mean, I can't tell you, this is already happening in general without too much organization. Because I was at the Penn State Auburn game on Saturday. And the next morning, before I head home, State College, Pennsylvania, where Penn State is, issued an indoor mask mandate. The sign on the sheets, which is if you don't know what sheets is, you're lost. I wish you the best, but you really need to go to a sheets. But it's a great gas station. Now the door on the thing said masks are mandatory. You walk in there and half the people don't have masks on. So clearly nobody's caring about the sign. Nobody's caring that this is now an ordinance from the town council. They're just not obeying it. And that's what we need. And we need a lot of people to do that. I have noticed a sharp uptick in mask wearing in Connecticut, even though there isn't a mandate, which is such a shame.
I work in Connecticut, and I got to say, where I work, I meet and run into a lot of like wealthier upper class people, and out of nowhere, all summer long, every single one of our clients was flying all over the world, all over the country, at the beach, at concerts, at museums, living life like it was normal. The second things got a little bit scary, people aren't going to weddings anymore. They're, double masking. I see, like, I could almost see it as the media starts to pick it up. The people that come into my store just hook, line, and sinker.
You said as things start to get a little scary. I mean, did they even really get scary as things were getting a little scary? Every day, what I would do was Google the Connecticut COVID death count. And it was always like 7-day average, 1. Today there were 0 deaths. Today, the next day there was 1.
But you did your research.
Every day.
Meanwhile, these people got their marching orders.
Yeah.
But
fear.
There are enough of us, I think, in Connecticut.
We're the majority.
Yeah, if we are the majority, then we need to start acting like it, because just don't comply. This worked in New Hampshire. I just saw this tweet earlier. I think it was Lebanon, New Hampshire. I don't know the second city, but Lebanon, New Hampshire issued a mask mandate. Nobody complied with it. The neighboring town council gathered together and discussed issuing a mask mandate themselves a couple of weeks after Lebanon put their mask mandate in. They decided not to because of mask non-compliance in the other town. So it works even to just stop governments from trying it, depending on the government. That's the best thing. If you're getting angry about this, find other people who agree with you. Just decide not to comply. I mean, in certain cases, you're going to have to. Like, I go to work, and I work in a medical setting. I have to wear a mask. Just the way it is. You know, when you're going to Stop and Shop, just do what you can.
Yep.
Don't do the VaxPass thing. Just try to go in and get a restaurant. If they ask for your papers, say, you know, sorry, this isn't Nazi land. You know, I'm not giving you my papers.
I wouldn't support them anyway. I'd turn away anyway. Perfect.
Right.
I know not to come here anymore.
Bar in New Haven. Never. Don't go to them. They voluntarily issued a vaccine mandate for to enter their bar.
You deserve to go out of business.
Yeah.
Because you know what? Last year when they weren't allowed to be opened, it was probably people like you who were going there to use them because you liked them for takeout food. And now they have to rely on the people that would have let them drown. All the people who argued all last year that they shouldn't be open, that you should be closed. You're not essential.
Yeah.
Yep. So the Libertarian Party of Connecticut. The Libertarian Party of Connecticut just issued a resolution, a little bit slower to get it done than some of the other states where like the state chairs just write it up and do it themselves. We had to convene as a committee. But yeah, part of the resolution was that we ask every single one who is willing, do not comply. Just civil disobedience. Henry David Thoreau, just don't do it. And you know, make them, if 5% of us decide not to comply, you know, what's the government going to do?
Right.
Now, it does depend on what the other 95% are doing. If 95% are just apathetic, it's fine. But if they're all dead set against you, they're going to turn on you. It's not going to work out. But yeah, if you have 5 to 10% of the population decide not to comply, they're not going to be able to enforce it.
Yeah, I think you'll have a cascading effect too. If 5% does it, that'll motivate the next 10. Then you'll have 15. That'll motivate the next 20. And people, some people don't like to join the fray until they see, that their side.
They're looking for the winning side.
Yeah, throughout all.
There you go. Back full circle.
Yes.
Americans love a winner.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's a good place to end it. Why don't you tell everybody, like, how can they find the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus, and if they're interested in joining, which I'm a member of now, after some of the things that Cuomo and de Blasio said. I had enough, and that was that motivated me to join and try and get on board with someone trying to do something about it, because the GOP ain't doing shit. So how can people find you guys?
The best place to go is takehumanaction.com. So if you know who Ludwig von Mises was, a great Austrian economist, and his great opus magnus was Human Action, and that's one of the best economic treatises. Impossible to read because it was written in English, but the guy's a German, so he was very old English style. Don't try to read it, but takehumanaction.com is where you'll find the Mises Caucus. You'll see our platform, and you'll see a sign-up sheet. Just let us know that you're from Connecticut. If you are, obviously, if you're not, whatever state, someone from your state will get in contact with you. That's how I got in contact with Skaggs, because he signed up there, and I saw his name on the list. And someone will get in contact with you. Best thing to do is just get involved locally with your Mises Caucus, probably with your local party. If you're in a different state, you might have a lot of county parties. If you don't, you can get one started. And really, we're just trying to get out there. I mean, the Libertarian Party of Connecticut, because the Mises Caucus is so influential, we have the Unmask Our Kids billboards.
I've seen those everywhere. Or in people's yards, too. I've seen them.
And that's been our biggest movement. Like, we had an enormous number of, like, middle-aged moms, younger moms, just joining us with that and just thanking us for standing up for the kids. and stuff like that. Now, they're not going to agree with us on everything. They might not even become libertarians, but they know about us now. And if they look at when they're going to the polls and they see a GOP guy that they're like, meh, I don't like that guy, or a Democrat, and like, not that great. Hey, that Libertarian Party, they stood up for us when it mattered. So we did Unmask Our Kids. We did rallies during the COVID lockdowns. We started on April 20th, 2020. We started a rolling rally, driving around honking horns. We did that for a while. That was a Mises Caucus guy that spearheaded all of that. This Sunday we're having a big music fest. We actually have Joe Jorgensen and Larry Sharp coming. That's on Sunday. So like, hey, parties are doing some stuff, and get involved as much as you can there, because that's the big thing. We need volunteers. We need bodies. We need funds. If you're a Bitcoin millionaire, hey, we could use some of your help. Some of this help to fund some of this stuff. Because hey, crypto it's a big libertarian world. This is what we live for. So a lot of people who got in on the ground floor are libertarian. I'm not saying you need to give us a lot, but hey, every little bit counts. We're running. I don't know if you've seen it yet, Skags, but we're running. It's up on YouTube now. TV ads for Unmask Our Kids.
Yes, I saw it.
Pretty moving. Yeah, it's pretty moving. Those kids, they were awesome. Yeah,
it's actually kids, right? Speaking about their experience in school with the masks. Yeah.
So there's a 30-second clip and a 1 minute long clip. So we're doing stuff. If you want to get involved, if you have some ideas on what to do, but you don't have the structure and apparatus to do it because you're kind of a lone wolf out there. Hey, joining the Mises Caucus is the way to go. Make sure you read the platform. If you don't agree with any of it, it's probably not your thing, but you probably will. And take humanaction.com. Someone will be in touch. We'll get you onboarded and ready to go.
Awesome. Stephen, thank you. Yeah, man. And I just think, an answer, because people keep asking us, like, what can I do? Something. Do anything. Do something, right? If every single person is pissed off, does one little tiny thing, or I'm not asking you to go storm the Capitol, join a party, have a conversation, anything.
We got pissed off and started a podcast.
Right. There you go. Start a podcast. Fine.
A lot of people are doing that, which is awesome. And I tell you what, with the interconnection of the world with social media and different groups and things, it's almost impossible. It's almost unjustified, I should say, to say that, well, I'm alone in this. I can't just do it alone. You're not alone. Somebody else agrees with you. They might not be in your neighborhood, and then it might not be any of your friends right now, but somebody agrees with you. Find them, and let's get moving together, because you're not going to do it alone. You're right. But hey, you get 10 people. Those 10 people get 10 people. Now you got 100. You've got a rally going, and it's time to start doing stuff.
Definitely. Yeah. All right, man. Stephen, thank you again.
All right.
Yeah, have a good night.
Awesome. Thank you. Doom Nation, that's been another Two Doom Men podcast. Thank you guys for joining us. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. You guys should know where to find us by now. Check our Instagram out at 2DoomMen_podcast. Link in our bio directs us to our link tree. And you can find us on all major podcast platforms. Doom Nation, thank you.
Later.